Chlöe Swarbrick.
Is the Prime Minister's response to concerns that have been raised over the past year by independent King's Counsel advice and Lawyers for Climate Action just this week that the government's climate policy changes risk our country breaching free trade agreements? Just trust me, bro.
Sorry, but
no, it's not.
Even I didn't understand the question there.
So is the Prime Minister's response to concerns that have been raised by independent King's Counsel and by Lawyers for Climate Action that his government's climate policy risk breaching our free trade agreements, just trust me, bro?
I'm confident we're meeting our obligations, but I'm a bit confused by that question. I couldn't hear it over the quacking from the other side.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Chlöe Swarbrick and no one else.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Yep.
I'd like to seek leave of the House to request another supplementary question, given that the Prime Minister couldn't hear my previous supplementary, given the clacking from his side of the House.
First part of the answer.
Leave is sought. Is there any objection?
Yes.
Interesting. No. Supplementary.
Too easy.
We'll hear the supplementary question in the silence other than the Speaker.
Will the Prime Minister... Seriously? Supplementary, Mr. Speaker. Will the Prime Minister seek any assurances whatsoever from independent advice or from his own officials that his government's policies are or are not in breach of our free trade agreements?
I'm confident we're meeting our obligations.
We're spending lots of resources achieving fairly little for climate. And of course, we're also so worried about global warming that there's a real risk that we end up under-worrying about many of the other and possibly much more important issues of hunger and disease and obviously lack of nutrition, jobs and corruption and all these other things that most people around the world actually tell us are their most important priorities and the ones that we can fix the cheapest. Trying to introduce an enforcement mechanism that can only be done if all other countries agree is probably not the way to go. New Zealand just was the first country in the world not only decided that they were going to go carbon neutral by 2050, but they actually asked for their preeminent economic institute to estimate how much will this cost. They found that if everything is done smartly, the cost will be 16% of New Zealand's GDP by 2050. And of course, if they do it badly, it'll be much more. This clearly is not politically sustainable. You can do this for a round of applause right now, but of course, when the regulations start to bite, you will get opposition, as we've seen in France and many other countries. So the issue is not to have bigger and bolder proposals. It is to have proposals that will actually work in the long term, and that has to be about innovation.
A funny thing happened on the way to climate Armageddon. It turns out the worst case carbon emissions scenario most often cited in climate research has now been found implausible. It's been scrapped. This is a huge deal. RCP 8.5, as it's called, was used in countless climate models, tens of thousands of research papers over the years, and became the backbone of predictions of runaway global warming. But now the IPCC, the world's most influential climate body, admits that their assumptions were wrong. Let me throw up a graphic here. Representative concentration pathways. This is basically what we would project with CO2 emissions. You can see that RCP 8.5 was being widely cited, widely used, widely plugged into climate models. And as you can see in that graph, it's notable how dramatic that is. And with that off the table, it kind of changes what we're projecting in a huge way.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And to know how big a change this is, if people can see that purple line, RCP 4.5, the world right now is undershooting that. So this graph shows how much carbon dioxide would accumulate in the atmosphere. And right now, expectations are that we're undershooting that 4.5 line. So we've been operating on that 8.5 line for the last 15 years or so. So it does represent a really significant change.
Tens of thousands of research papers have been used, continue to publish that 8.5 scenario. Media headlines amplified the findings. Governments and international organizations built these implausible scenarios into policy and regulation. It is not an exaggeration that the globe has spent trillions chasing this.
Call on Chlöe Swarbrick.
And Mr. Speaker, for anybody who is tuned in, watching Parliament TV, those poor dozen souls or so who may be hearing, so we are once again left with the ultimate question of who pays. Who pays, Mr. Speaker, when climate change charged weather events devastate Aotearoa New Zealand? Let I remind this government that we are currently in May of 2026. In just the 5 months alone that have passed this year so far, we have had 21 states of emergency. All of those states of emergency and all of that weather far more extreme, far more frequent, demonstrably as a result of climate change.
New Zealand have promised to go carbon neutral by 2050. The average estimate is this will cost 16% of GDP. Whoa. If you take this across the entire century, the total cost for New Zealand will be in the order of $5 trillion US. Then you'll say, but at least they'll do some climate good. Yes, but only just. The difference is that they will cut temperatures by the end of the century by 4/1000th of a degree. Or to put it differently, basically postpone global warming by about 3 weeks at the end of the century. No, I don't think most people want to spend $5 trillion doing that.